We'll be talking about a universal agenda. So I have been on a life journey like you have, and I have worked in probably over 60 countries in the world. I've been very fortunate to see the awesome, the not so awesome, the mediocre, the special, the not so special, the tragic, and the absolutely incredibly awe-inspiring individuals and communities around the world. But as I journeyed through this journey, I also started to question how we function in international relations and international diplomacy. And I started to question about our world within the universe. And so I've spent the last couple of years trying to better understand that in the context of my role now as your Vice Provost for Global Affairs at this very special institution that has also these very special relationships with people like yourself. And so I see it incumbent upon me to try and share what I'm thinking about with audiences like you so that we can collectively start thinking about it. Because this is a world issue. And by saying a world issue, it's an individual, personal issue as well. You know, how do we view ourselves now within the universe? And so this slide kind of captures it, because I think we go on our daily business and we don't think about ourselves in a broader context. In fact, we almost think about ourselves being in the Scripps College forum right now, and that's about all we're thinking about when there's all this else going on. But there's also this context that we're a tiny little wee thing in this very big Milky Way, right? So I'm going to take you along this journey and then show you ultimately how this wraps around you and wraps around me in terms of my role in globalization, but also my role in helping to rebuild and advance our Center for International Studies and the link that you will see with the College of Communication, because I see there is an inextricable link that we need to build on. So what do I mean by universalization? Well, there is no definition until I actually wrote one with my colleague Ted Hewitt and put it on Wikipedia. So if you actually go on Wikipedia, there is now this definition. And basically what I'm trying to say, or what we're trying to say, is that you can't look at the world anymore without looking at it within the context of the universe. And you can't look at the world and be satisfied with a conflict negotiation agenda. We have to switch and really start to seriously consider, what do we mean by a cooperation negotiation agenda? And I think if you're just looking at the example very recently and very tragically about Malaysia Airlines and Ukraine and Russia, that brings it all very close to home for everybody. That's a very powerful example. You'll see how it ties in. But again, this isn't a new concept. You know, back in 1948, there was this businessman who tried to get, you know, the universe being another country. And I'm not sure that's the way forward, but it's just the whole context that somebody saw outer space as potentially another nation that we should be thinking about back in the 40s. The idea of cooperation and link to space goes back, and I'm sure he's not the only gentleman that talked about space and cooperation at that time, a bit tongue-in-cheek, I might point out, because, you know, we say that this is probably the only area of cooperation, but at the same time we know that conflict pervades almost everything that we do. Notwithstanding, I think if there is any opportunity to promote gender, equity, and cooperation, it's with the space agenda, because it's still new, right? And if we could learn our lessons and apply them to this context, this would be the best time to start doing it, because I believe the implications are far more important than even ourselves just on Earth. Marshall McLuhan. Do you remember this gentleman that I spoke about the other day?
Yes.
So now that I've told you who he is, what did he do?
Created global community.
Right? What else did he do? What else did he say? The Yeah, what else? The medium is
The message.
Yes, the medium is the message. And again, think of medium, and vera is different fora, right? And so what I find interesting is that he was also in the 60s, when I think it was 64, when the medium of the message came out, and he was thinking about the global village. He talked about surfing. He actually predicted the internet, even though he really conceptually didn't know what it was at the time. But in the 60s, this is a very powerful time when space was coming on board and people were thinking about communications all at the same time, but it wasn't necessarily linked. The reality, though, is that we are only able to be in outer space because of communications technology. We're only able to do the satellite technology that we have because of communications. We're only able to do the kinds of work, good, bad, or indifferent, that we all do today, including data-driven decision making, right? Of a power and magnitude that we've never experienced before. And the reality is that, again, back in the 60s, when Star Trek predicted it, they also predicted the link between space and communications right in the canoe. You know, this is quite profound, actually, when you start to see the links at a time when, you know, we weren't thinking about these things, right? But they were being predicted. So there's the universalization piece. Now let's bring it to the communications piece. You know, what's your influence? Are we empowering ourselves, or are we disempowering ourselves through our communication strategies? And you as educators, you as scholars, you as researchers need to really seriously ask that question, because you are shaping the next generation of communicators who are formally trained to be communicators, because the vast majority of us don't have your expertise, correct? But somebody has to lead. Somebody has to show us the way. And so as I see it, your role and the script's role, for example, is really quite profound of how you influence all of us today, because we need to understand your business in order to do our business and our business well. And I mean, that's run the world, because right now the world is run by communications. This was just recently put on the Twitter this week, and I happened to capture it the other day. And again, silencing journalism leaves us all in the dark. But again, it's silencing good journalism. And there's a difference, as you well know. And, you know, before we sort of talk about that in detail, but it is about principled journalism, right? Is the difference. There's a lot of journalism out there today that is not necessarily in our collective best interests. And that's going to be very serious as we move forward. Now, I did a little bit of homework, and I don't know if these are the principles that you worked on, but this comes from a respected site, and I wanted to know if you knew what your principles of journalism are. And so I highlighted them in pictures and wondered if you might be able to, if we went through them. There's 9 of them. So if I was to pick this one, what's that principle? What? Truth. Absolutely. What's this one?
Confidence.
No, not really. No. What's this? What? Excellent. Excellent. What's this one? I think this is Henry Hall. Verification. Yeah, awesome. What's this one? Be independent. What's this one?
Minimize harm.
Kind of, but not quite. It's a harder one.
Ethics.
What is this?
Ethics.
Close? What's this? What does that unit do? It gives you energy, power, exactly. Cautioning, right? How do you monitor power? Keep a distance, right? Right? That's one of your principles. Okay. What's this one? Go for it. What's she doing? Who is she?
She's asking.
People.
People. And what is she doing? She's questioning, right? So it's the idea of being able to question, criticize, right? You know? Okay. Next one. This is very funny. I didn't understand it first, so I don't know if you're going to understand it. Henry had to explain it to me. So, astronauts can't cry in space. Sorry, there isn't enough fuel to get you home. So it's a comedy, right? It's a comedic reality of something that's very sad, right? So what is, I'm going to tell you because I wouldn't have been able to do it, but I really liked it and I kept it because what it did is it brought the significance of something, you know, and identified how important this was, the fact that he couldn't cry, and made it relevant to the rest of us. Is that, you know, here was a very sad, tragic event that he put in through black humor that allowed us to understand that some decisions can be really tragic, or some realities we have to live with. And how you communicate it is really important. So I kept it in. What about this baby?
That's not
Yeah. Well, I'll help you out on this one, but I like this again. It's, Anybody have an idea?
It's being accurate.
Yeah, I'm proportional, right? Comprehensive and proportional, but I liked his example because it used math. And a lot of behind the decisions that we make actually are mathematical. And it is about presenting the facts in a proportional manner. So again, I really like the context of it. And the last one? In dance again. What is it? Last but not least, have a conscience, right? So these are pretty profound principles. So if I was to summarize them, there they are. And it's the Pew Research Journalism Project was the search site, so it was one of your journals. I thought these were very good. But look at the reality of journalism today. And does anybody know Jon Stewart? Okay, so Jon Stewart is very funny. And he's a late night person, and only those who watch late night movies watch them. So I actually don't watch him, like I tape it and watch him because he's so good. But on this week, Rupert Murdoch, who I know is a friend of journalism all around the world and a friend of all citizens around the world, as he's very tacitly changed the whole world of journalism, and that we've lost our independence through his, his rally for, I don't know how to describe him, but I mean, I think he's challenged this world in way. I'm hard to say so publicly how much he frustrates me and saddens me actually in terms of what one person, one leader has done in the communications field to disempower the world of a magnitude and scale that we're facing today. But I loved Jon Stewart sending out the idea that if he bought this, then CNN would be for sale, and don't let another corporation buy it, but let us buy it. Now, it's a joke, but actually it would be a great way to take back to us and re-engage your principles. So I kind of thought it was kind of a profound opportunity for me to place that out there, that all is not lost if we look differently about how we manage this incredible world of journalism that you're having to deal with. Even the whole area of drone journalism, just think about the ramifications to citizenship and access. And this is just the beginning. And I'm going to just then start to place it in the context of the world within the universe, because the world now, because we're out in the universe, has now changed dramatically too, because of you and because of communications. Let's step back though, just for a little bit, and let's place the context of where we are in this globe. A decade ago, we used to think of developing countries, emerging economies, established economies. We used to think of rich and poor as being separate agendas, right? It's over there. Global health was something that was over there, right? It didn't impact on us in little Athens, Ohio, right? Where now today we know that we have poverty and issues that are as serious as any other community around the world. It's just different. And so our economies 2008 shows that our economy is one economy. So we're actually talking about a global agenda, one agenda. And let's just have a look. We have a global economy. We have a changing economic center of gravity. And what's very interesting, it's a back to the future. It's where we were, a few thousand years ago. So it's kind of interesting how what goes around comes around. We have Africa rising. Who would have thought? A decade ago, that's not what people were thinking. And the reason is because today, talent is mobile and ideas are borderless. As a result of communications, people have access to data, access to opportunities that individuals didn't have in a previous world. The world has changed. The challenges, both the opportunities and the good, but the risk is that we also have an amassing of cultures. And I was telling Steve Howard, who's a colleague of mine, who many of you I think know, and he was at our event, that I was going today. And the very first thing he said to me was, well, don't present that English is the universal language. And I said, don't worry, I will not present that. But again, it's profound, right? Because that's the tension. We have all these wonderful cultures. You don't want to lose language at a time where you could lose language unless we manage it and manage it well. right? So that's the kind of tension that we're dealing with. We have climate change, and climate change is a phenomenon where we are all currently sinking our little ship, and it's happening. But we walk around because we know we're so disempowered, we have no idea how to deal with it. So we just almost pretend it doesn't exist, even though we know. And every once in a while, it kind of creeps up on us, and we think, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? But we don't have the toolkit, and that's a problem. The opportunity, as I see it, which again is our challenge, is that we have shifted from a societal focus to the opportunity for the individual to make a difference. And this has huge implications for journalism and everything we do, even how we teach and learn, because the individual reigns now. It's not the classroom. But I guess at the end of the day, when we look at our global agenda, it is a one global agenda. What happens here impacts what happens somewhere else, because you're here and we're impacting on you, we're all impacting on each other, and now you're going to go home. Look at the influence of just you coming here and how you've changed and how you've influenced our community here, right? It's profound. But we can't look at it in isolation now. We have to look at us in the context that we are just one within a universe. And the research suggests that there's not just one Earth or 15 planets, there's actually 17 billion. That's a lot of planets. So I guess I'm no mathematician and I'm no statistician, but my guess are the odds are is that there is some form of civilization, like us or not, out there, right? I mean, like 17 billion, I don't know. It might be just one or two, that we might have to be thinking about. But it does make you think. And they do predict, and I'll tell you later about how close it is that we might find this out. But that universe, back in the 60s, when the Russians and the Americans first landed on the moon, was the best kept secret to all of us, right? And they kept it pretty close to their chest. And we used to think of the moon as green cheese or whatever we wanted to imagine, right? But they had knowledge that we did not have, right? Definitely. Now, does anybody know who this guy is? He actually is a Canadian. His name is Chris Hadfield. You should look him up because his influence on children has been phenomenal. Because what he's done is he publicized it. He was the commander of the International Space Station last year for a couple of years. And he advertised and went public on everything and reached into all these little kids' rooms and had them all come in their little space suits to talk to him while he was at the International Space Station. But he showed them that they brush their teeth and they wear clothes, not space suits, on a daily basis. And he sang a song, a David Bowie song, very famous one, and put it on the YouTube, and like gazillions of people read it. But the message was, this is the norm. He brought the idea that commanding a spaceship is something that you as a little kid could actually do someday. It's not foreign. And not only did he do it in Canada, but he did it all over the world. These little kids all over the world were talking to him. Can you imagine being in Ethiopia and having a conversation with somebody up in an International Space Station? Like, how cool is that? The other thing is the advertisement has gone from space suits and space monsters to the idea that here HSBC mentions it like he was going to the grocery store, right? It's just another camp, space camp. Again, keep in mind, I'm very astute. I'm no scholar, but I'm no stoopy-doop about the role of advertising and the shift in the advertising agenda. To me, this is profound. Let's just look at the number of space stations that are out there in terms of looking at what's happening and managing their future. It's over 200 now. Is that a lot? I don't know. There's 194 countries. Not all countries are represented, but, there's a lot of people out there thinking critically about outer space. And interestingly enough, many of you are too. But even if you're not today, you are thinking about it. And I will guarantee that there is not one person from your country that's involved in the space agenda in some way, right? We're all impacted. But again, I don't think we thought of all of these countries being involved in outer space. We used to think of it as sort of China, India, Russia, United States, Europe, right? Those were sort of the big kahunas. But actually, we're all involved. So, very important. And there is a large corporate and government interest. Guess how much money we know is spent in outer space right now? Shot in the dark? Ha, shot in the light? I love it. 100 billion? A little more than that. Which is a lot, right? 300 billion. And that's what we know, right? So I figure if I know that, it's a lot more. So, but it's huge, and it's diverse, and it's the full spectrum. We also have citizens. Have you heard about the 2020 or 2024? You can sign up to live the one-way trip to Mars. How about that? Has anybody signed up? No. Do you know how many?
Some other people.
Yeah, I've thought of that too. Yeah, I think we could.
We volunteered.
Yeah, but living, yeah, you know exactly. But the fact is, do you know how many people have signed up? Many thousands. Like, it's not a small number. Yeah. Like in the first 3 months or something in Canada, because I was home at the time and I was quite curious, there was like 350 Canadians had signed up. I had applied, and this is just Canada. So again,
Have you signed?
Have
you signed up?
I haven't. Would you like me to? Am I on your list? You know? Yeah, but seriously, right?
Quick way to lose a lot of weight. Gravity and
Yeah, no, but I mean, this is very intriguing that this is a serious opportunity, right? This is like getting on the boat, you know, and coming to North America many, many years ago. You know, this is not all that different. Just think about it. People were leaving knowing they were never, I got goosebumps just thinking about it, knowing that they were never going to see their family members again, right? They made difficult choices, or they were entrepreneurs or risk takers, or criminals, had nothing to lose and everything to gain to start again. So off they went. So I think we're seeing a very similar phenomenon. Isn't this fun? Okay. The other thing you often read about, and you know, I think we're all, if you work in development, you're always looking for solutions, right? And people do think that this could also be the panacea to development. So our world is crumbling, so let's save it by us all escaping and figuring out, you know, how we can do the same thing to the universe, right? Like just leave the Earth and we'll all now move out to a space station and live, right? So there is a little bit of that. But I thought this little cartoon was kind of profound because it's, I'm looking for a secure position in a less competitive academic environment. And I thought one of his questions, and I don't know in your university how important it is, but I do know how important it is in our university, is he's probably looking for free parking, because that's one of our biggest academic issues. True? You know? Yeah, I think in outer space you could probably have free parking right now. You know, not a lot of worry about parking space. But it just nicely brought it back down to our little classroom here and shows you that everybody has an opportunity or a challenge. It's all how you look at it. But no kidding, you know, Vint Cerf, who was the architect of the internet on Earth, is actually out there thinking about how we're going to have the internet between celestial bodies. We're at 9:30? Thanks. Okay, we're good. Okay, so now let's turn that idea from there and look now onto the Earth. So, how many satellites are out there? Thousands, exactly. And where are they looking? On us. There's thousands of them. Do you think that they're looking at you? They can, right? They can. They can. Exactly. And so I was actually at a space conference in McGill doing the same thing exactly at that time. So I just said, right? And then back to the point that there's 17 billion of them. And, you know, they predict now in 20 years, we're going to find out who, what they are and where they come from. But rather than looking at the outer space, I think, as another nation, I think we have to look at it like a neighborhood. And we're just Earth, we're a house on a street. And how do we govern that, right? A very different look. And if we look at it as a neighborhood, we're not looking at conflict resolution or bilateral relations. We're looking at how we get along. Because in neighborhoods, it's a community. It's a very profound agenda. Because The only thing we know is what we know what's happening on Earth. We don't know what's happening anywhere else, and we need to be diplomatically thinking about that. What we do know is we have a ton of garbage in space, and it's very serious. It's intense. Look at it. You know? We have a ton of garbage on Earth, and it's intense, right? So we got issues, you know, and we're not dealing with them. That's the problem. We're ignoring them by and large. I love comics, right? So the question is, for us, are we looking at nation building anymore? Or are we looking at world building? Because there's a profound difference, right? Are we looking at a competitive and first approach, right? Which is often what we present ourselves as. Or are we looking at a different approach? Worlds apart or worlds together? I like this one. It's hard though. It's really hard, you know? But what you have to appreciate is that all those satellites run by all those countries, they're governing us, not our governments. So some of the dilemma that we have is you have to think about the fact that in order for an American to get to the International Space Station, who drives them? Who actually drives the plane? Who owns the plane that takes them to the space station? Anybody know?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. The Russians. So you know what? The Americans aren't going right now. That's exactly what's happened. Does anybody know about this? Mm-mm. It's profound. So we have the United Nations. Are they governing? Mm-mm. You know, we have a few schools, very few, too few, that are looking at this issue. You know, and where's the public scholarship on this? There isn't any. I could hardly find anything. Seriously. You know? So whose hands lies our destiny? Very key. It's a big question. But you know where we start? Here. Because the next generation is no longer global issues, right? It's these kids. They're in the universe. And we are responsible for them. So what's our agenda? What is our agenda? How do we tackle this problem, right? Well, how I see it is we need all hands on deck. We have to work together and figure this out, right? We got to use the idea of universalization as a concept in order to pull us together, where cooperation is the driving agenda. And we have to take advantage that we have talent all around the world. And we need it. I don't care where we're from. I want the best, the brightest, and the boldest to be solving this. So here's a really good example. And again, Scripps is a leader. Scripps is a leader in many areas. And again, we have a colleague, Don Flournoy, who's been vested in outer space and the role of solar in the communication. And he takes his media students to a space conference every year and has done so for a long time. These people are very fortunate because they're thinking about these big issues, right? Because the question for you is, how are you going to frame the issues moving forward as a journalist, as a citizen, as a lobbyist, as an international? Do we do it as one, right? N equals one? Or do we try and frame it as a picture and understand the picture? Do we focus on cooperation strategies rather than conflict, right? What's your agenda? What's our message? Because I believe every journalist news item has a message, and it tends to be this, because that's what we see. We don't see how we solve problems. We see how we create conflict. So we gotta look at it from a much stronger cooperative world nation building agenda. So the challenge, telling the story, not a piece of it, building a talent for advancing universalization cooperatively. So, why is that not going? Oops, sorry. So let me just put it in context. So here we are developing our global strategy. So we have a vision statement that says leading globally to prepare global leaders. So our contribution over the last year has been to add it ever so slightly to say leading globally for good. So it's clear what we're trying to do, right? I mean, it's simple, but it's clear. And when I look at our Center for International Studies, which is within my portfolio, what I am doing now is I'm talking with everybody in the university about how we can bring universalization into the international relations dialogue and do it in cooperation with the Scripps College of Communication and those working in communications technology, so that those who are graduating from our programs have the toolkit to promote a cooperation strategy over a conflict strategy. So, very important last couple of statements. Chris Hadfield, who I just talked about, that's him as a little boy in the 60s when this was first coming out, right? And he was on a YouTube, he was on a news thing where I saw him on YouTube, and he made a very important quote, I thought. He says, it's always easier to believe something than it is to understand it. And so again, I look at today, right? And there's a picture of Chris with his mic, right? And then here is James Kirk, Star Trek. And you think about the space station, that's the real space station, that's the envisaged space station, right? You reverse it now, he is really the astronaut. He is really commanding a space station today. Where this guy was, we were believing it. And he's the guy talking with the mic, right? So it's kind of an interesting transition, but again, it tells the message. He's a scientist. He's out there working with us, trying to understand the complexity of the world, but he's also an artist. He's a musician and a communicator, and he's done a phenomenal job, and I would highly encourage you, because I believe he has adopted these principles that are your principles and that I fundamentally believe are ours. Thank you.